This is a hard community. This is a pretty, we're so remote, you know, there's a lot of independent people out here with a lot of various backgrounds and stuff like that.
People out here are a lot different than people from the city. And boy, I learned that when we first moved out here.
I think people are kind of lonesome, and I think that they're self-sufficient, but they keep themselves kind of self-contained.
Yeah, it's important to have close friends to get support from.
The majority of the people in this area do not know Christ as their Savior, and we have a real burden to see that happen.
It's not always rewarding in terms of seeing results, and the results are slow and hard coming. And then just about the time someone starts coming to church, he leaves the community to go work someplace else.
Once having met Brad and Connie and seeing the consistency of what they were trying to do, then we were willing to step out.
In the middle of nowhere, and when I got back to the highway, my vehicle was dead, the battery was dead, and it was a nasty day. And here comes this guy along, and he stopped to know if I needed help.
We would like to see another couple maybe join us in the ministry in this area to kind of free us up to be spreading out into the further reaches a little more.
Alaska. Majestic mountains. Spectacular glaciers. Pristine waters. Wildlife around every corner. A land on which the Lord has truly laid his hand. Abundant wealth from natural resources have given rise to large cities with many modern conveniences. In contrast, the Alaskan bush in many ways is still a turn-of-the-century frontier lifestyle. Into this last frontier, Brad and Connie Gavitt of Northern Frontier Ministries find themselves called.
But the winters are long, dark, and cold.
Yeah.
Hauling water and because, you know, they don't have wells, or, you know, we didn't used to have electricity, and so they learned to deal with a lot of things.
This community was a very rough community when it started. I think all homestead areas historically are that way. You get a whole lot of Alaska people are either running to or running from something when they come, and there was a lot of people running from something when they got here.
People would come to the bus stop wearing guns to bring their kids to the school bus, and they were shooting at one another, and there was a lot of domestic violence. And in fact, in the early days, the troopers and the EMTs were real reluctant to come up here because it was such a wild and crazy place.
In a way, I think a lot of people that do come to live this lifestyle are that way, are loners a little bit anyway. They just kind of are, you know, they just a little different breed of people.
The men rarely get involved in spiritual things.
I think there's a lot of the people that maybe need some direction, maybe some good work, some guidance. Just a lot of simple skills are missing in a lot of the families out here, you know, motivation and just some of the basic skills.
You see people who are involved in like magazines that deal with being survivors or mercenaries or this type of thing. There's a lot of guys who are into serious hunting and fishing, which is a healthy outlet, but you rarely see them involved in anything but physical things. There's not much involvement in intellectual or spiritual, definitely not spiritual.
Well, a lot of people are pretty anti-church, you know.
To begin with.
To begin with, so it's kind of a hard nut to crack to get into the community and be accepted by the community. But getting out and visiting with folks and getting acquainted with folks, I think, is a big part of it.
And there's a lot of dead time in the winter, and there's drinking, and some of the men in this area, and some of the women are probably smoking pot, that type of thing. For the most part, the people are still, they're good people, but they're just not willing to take that step into an area they're not familiar with in terms of their spirituality.
When we moved here, the neighbors told us, well, Alaskans give you a year to see whether you're going to stay or not. And they're standoffish, and if, you know, you survive that year, well, then they'll come around and, you know, they'll associate with you.
It's a slow process, you know, because of the diverse backgrounds of the people that live out here and the independent nature of the people that live so far away from town and stuff like that. It's a slow process, but, you know, Brad does a lot of visitation, Connie does, and so, you know, I think that's a big part of it. It's a slow process, but I think it's turning around.
We were already traveling to Slana for Bible studies when we moved to Gakona, and thought, well, we've moved at least 15 miles closer and the travel will be that much less. But as we were involved here with the Bible studies and the different things we were doing, it began to really grow, and we saw the need was more than we anticipated really in the area, and the fact that we were being accepted.
And on top of that, we realized that even though we spent 2, 3, up to 5 times, you know, 5 different days of the week out here, there was still a barrier, and there was still not people that we were able to reach. There were still people that considered us outsiders, and therefore we didn't have any rapport with them. And by moving up, that has changed dramatically.
I would use the word symbiotic. They're in harmony with the environment, and they take what is many of the traditions of the people here, both native and non-native, and they try to synchronize that with Christianity so that it's palatable for the people in this area.
Up here, people have to do pretty much everything for themselves. You are a builder, you're an electrician, you're a plumber, you're an excavator, you're everything, because you just don't have those services available, and many can't afford them if they were. So you learn to do it all.
They meet people where they are. Brad is a man that men relate to and are at ease with, and I think that's a big thing, especially for Alaska men, because they're suspicious of preachers, if you will. And so I think that Brad's just everyday mannerisms and his helpfulness to people. You know, they go out and help people with their everyday work, day in and day out, and, you know, take time away from their own projects.
We've put in septic systems, wired houses, driven wells, painted, roofed, sheetrocked, you name it, everything. We help people do those things.
You know, Brad has an appeal to men because Brad he has a spiritual maturity, but he also has the ability to work with his hands. He can do mechanical things. He can do framing. He knows the skills that men in this area need to know in order to survive.
As far as the women go especially, I mean, we have our Bible study and we have card making, and we, you know, really look forward to those times together, and I think that helps everybody get through the winter a lot.
Women attend that who don't attend church, otherwise they come to the church to make cards, because there's no place to buy greeting cards around here, and it's a great social occasion. And, you know, women who would not walk into the church otherwise do, and that's Connie's area.
I helped one couple set all their business stuff up on computer and helped them to learn how to do the whole system. I mean, it's just limitless, the ways that you can use your talents out here to reach the people, to spend time with them.
And to have somebody where the pastor's wife goes out sheep hunting, you know, that you just don't see very many places. So I think they fit very well in this community, and with the shooting and hunting and fishing, and just they enjoy Alaska type activities, so therefore that opens up opportunities to share with the locals.
that working with people seems to open them up. I've noticed that specifically when I work with men. When their hands are busy, they're more likely to open up and talk about issues and their problems. It's phenomenal how just a couple of hours of helping them on a project that they maybe feel behind on or something else will loosen their tongues. And you start to hear what's really going on inside of them and in their lives. And you know, you're better able to pray for them, you're better able to minister to them, and it makes a huge difference when you can visit with them while you're busy. Because we're available.
We're part of the community. We see them, interact with them day by day, and we're here when tragedy occurs. We're here when exciting things happen. That makes a big difference.
We have had occasions where folks that don't come to the church, you know, they've been invited, but they just won't come, and they're not believers. But yet these people, in times of tragedy, I think of one woman when it was her, I think it was her brother, was lost at sea out where she came from, St. Lawrence Island, in a whaling expedition, and she called us asking for prayer. And you know, it's those little things like that. And there is a trust and a fellowship of sorts that comes from that kind of thing, where in times of need they turn to you for something that they feel may help.
And our church family, I think we're, you know, I know that we're in need of a lot, but I think there's a good, strong group of people here.
The good, strong hub, the group, the church as a base, and for outreach that's within range, a place for then people to come is extremely important. But being the only staff, if you want to call it that, of the church, we are prevented from getting very far afield for any amount of time because we have commitments here that are involving with the church, with the Bible studies, the youth group, and the church services. You know, from about Thursday morning to the end of Sunday, we have to be here. And then, you know, for visiting and so forth, it takes a lot of time just working in this community. On the other hand, if with some more help, we could keep the community and this church, keep that going, I guess. I don't know how else to put that. We went to high school together, although we didn't really know each other. We knew who each other were, but we didn't know each other.
I'd graduated from college and moved back home to be with my family to share Christ with them because they didn't know Christ. And at that point I was looking for a church, and I happened to find the same church that Brad and his family was going to. And they had a post-high school, college, and career group. And that's where we met. Yeah, our first date was Christmas Eve, and a month later we were engaged. In July that year,
6 months later we were married.
We were married.
So.
And it's been a great time.
Both worked and built our first home, and ultimately ended up going into business. And then we, through the course of all that, we had 4 children. We
built our dream house.
Built our dream house.
We designed an old farm type style house, and it was pretty neat.
It was a beautiful home, and built that, and business was doing well, and things were going along good. But then God kind of threw a wrench in the gears, and it seemed as though there was something missing.
We had wanted to do part-time missions with our kids, and we were realizing that they were growing up and they'd be leaving, and we didn't have a chance to do that yet.
Our business was occupying all of our time. It was a year-round business, and very, very labor-intensive, and it was just taking all of our time. And so we were looking to simplify our lives to be able to do some of those part-time or maybe summer missions that we had wanted to do for a long time. We really loved the northern areas, and knew that there was missions work going on in Canada, way north of that, with the indigenous peoples. And so we thought, well, maybe if we sold the business, we could move to Maine, just work part-time, and have the summers to go on missions trips, hopefully into that northern regions. Had never taken a 2-week vacation in our life, and we finally decided to take one. But it was during those 2 weeks' time that God made it very clear that it wasn't part-time missions he was looking for.
Nor was it Maine.
Nor was it Maine.
We weren't sure at that point where, but we knew it wasn't Maine and it was not part-time missions.
As I would often do when I'm bothered, is walk on the road, looking down, kicking stones, whatever might be in the way, you know, just moving along. And as I moved along this dirt road, I came to a fork in that road. The dirt road went two different directions. This is a road I'd never been on before, and it seemed as though I'd come to a point in time that I had to make a decision. And it wasn't so much which road I went down at that point, but it was pointing to the fact that I was at a crossroads in my life. I was at a fork in the road in my life, and I had to make a decision of which way I was going to go. And it was right there at that fork in the road that I gave it over to the Lord and said, whatever you want from me, I'll do. So in the process of all this, we'd put our business up for sale, and it was a bad economy. We were told we probably wouldn't be able to sell the business, but we did. God made it happen, and we did find a buyer. Well, the time came to move, and we were packing up, emptying out the house and packing our trailer, and our house hadn't sold yet, but a couple came along and looked at it while we were moving stuff out, and they agreed to buy it. So anyway, everything went away.
And we had just enough money to get up here.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully it was going to work out because we did not have enough money to get back.
So we left Rhode Island with a Suburban and a 16-foot cargo trailer, 4 kids, 2 dogs, and us, and headed for Alaska. Right at that point in time, it was a tremendous relief and a tremendous load off my mind that God was in control and we would do whatever He wanted to do. And we were in our early 40s, so this became a second career, and a very different career, very different focus, almost 180 degrees from what we had been doing. Very satisfying.
As it says in Matthew, the harvest is ready, the workers are few.
We see the need growing. We're still just 2 people. And we've become more and more aware of needs, of not just physical needs, but spiritual needs. And you can't be everywhere at once. And this is just this community. We hear of needs in the other communities. McCarthy, folks there would love to have us there on a regular basis. And we love to be with them. They're a great bunch of believers, and they're doing quite well on their own, but some pastoral care could go a long way to really encourage them. We can only be one place at a time.
You can't shortchange one community to kind of go and fill in another community. It seems like everybody gets
Crumbs.
Yeah, crumbs at that point in time.
Part of the process, we were in a successful business, and which seemed to be the American dream, I guess. Yet something was lacking, and it was during that time, one of those times in Maine, when I was doing my devotions reading early in the morning on the cabin porch, that I read in the book of Romans, and it says, kind of in my own version, how will they be saved unless they hear, and how will they hear unless someone preaches, and how will they preach unless someone is sent? And it was at that point in time that it really struck me that God was really calling us to take the gospel to other people as a first business in our life, not as a secondary business.
The Lord gave us an incredible burden for the people here. It was one that was undeniable, and I just actually even burst out in tears thinking that if we were not here, who would be praying for these people? Or who would be there when their dad died and needed some help and comfort? Or who would be there when they were out of firewood and too sick to go out and get it themselves? It was just an incredible burden, and making us realize that we were right where God wants us to be, doing the things that He wants us to do.
They are really some very special people, and they give so much to the community. It's just they're constantly doing stuff for other people all the time. There's so many needs here. There are a lot of needs. It's
People who need wood cut, people who need help building, people who are sick, people who have died, they give support.
Think of Brad and Connie. I think of a couple that is positive and upbeat and consistent, and you can rely on them.
Preaching in an area that's so remote, such as Slana, in an area like this with a Joel, the pastor, who just really allows the Spirit to lead him in his preaching and his interaction with the people who are attending his church. And sometimes there's not a lot of people there, but he prepares as if that church is going to be packed every time.
And it hasn't had any backward movement, I don't think. You know, I can't look back and say, oh, we made a goof there, or we did something wrong here. It seems as though God has led precisely, and everything has happened in the right time. And he provided when there were needs. He provided us with a piece of land to build a home on. It couldn't have been in a better spot, right next to the post office. We're very accessible, very visible to the entire community. We're right smack in the middle of the community, so we can get to anybody's place quickly and easily. So just, I think that, you know, God's hand has really been in it.
In the book of Luke, Christ is speaking, and he says, "The fields are white unto harvest, but the laborers are few. Beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out more laborers." And that's what we're doing. We're beseeching the Lord to send out more laborers. Maybe it's you, or maybe it's somebody that you know that has a heart for this area or these people that you could speak to or show this video to. Search your heart and see what God would have you to do.
What's the thing that most people don't know about?
Outhouses.
I was going to say, outhouses. That usually really gets people's attention, especially when you're talking about 30 and 40 below zero.